Y'all will never believe what happened. Shortly after I was posting all these fun stories, we were having a good car drive time. I was sharing in my stories over the years, like thinking about all my favorite ways to make the best of the trip. About 3:30, we heard a faint sound, almost like it reminded me of that sound when you were little and you put something on your bicycle spokes and you could just hear it like tapping. And I was like, that's weird. So I told it to Steve. Steve couldn't hear it, but then finally it happened again. And it went from like, okay, every few minutes I do hear like this faint sound, to rapidly, within 10 minutes, it was unignorable. It was rapid. It was no longer intermittent. It was hindering the ability to accelerate. We were like, what are we gonna do? He immediately starts pulling off of the next exit. By the time he gets to the bottom of the exit, the entire van shuts off. Like, the sound is so loud, it shuts off. And I was like, and all the kids are on tech and they had headphones. And I was like, because it's tech time, I was like, Zach and Zane, I need you to get out and I need you to push the car with Dad. And then Zadie immediately starts crying, because how scary is that? They hop out and Zoe's like, I can push too. I'm like, just get out and push, because like we're literally in the middle of the road. So they push us to a gas station. There's one on each side of the road. It's in the middle of nowhere. It was in Bruton, Alabama. On one side, the gas station was so abandoned, it looked like a dump site. It looked like one of those things that you see on Hoarders, like people just like dump stuff. And the other side, it was like, that gas station barely looks open, but I think it is. But it's the kind of gas station that you would be like, I'm not stopping there. I'll just go somewhere else. We had no choice. And as they push us, they're literally pushing us, which was kind of exciting. It's like, look at this, my boys are pushing us. As we're pulling in, I see an old truck with the front left hubcap off. And it looks like that thing has been abandoned and been sitting there forever, which felt like, oh my gosh, what is happening? Immediately, it's like total chaos, right? Like the kids have a bunch of questions. Steve and I are like trying to problem solve, like, what are we gonna do? What's the first step? What's the next step? Immediately, Steve's on the phone calling the insurance company to get a tow and to talk to the dealership to tow this van to the dealership. But it's also like, we're in the middle of nowhere, but it's also like, where are we? Where are you sending the tow to? You know what I mean? Like, we know where we're going, but who like checks every city when they go? Immediately, I get on the phone and I'm calling rental car places, and rental car place after rental car place after rental car place has no rentals, not one single van. So I call 1-800-Enterprise, because I'm like, they'll pick us up. The lady books me 2 cars, because they do not have a 15 passenger. And she books me 2 cars, a full-size van of 7 and then a like mid-size car. And I'm like, that'll work. I'm just glad to have something, because I'd called multiple places and everybody kept passing me around to a different place. They were like, maybe this place has it. Oh, maybe this place has it. Maybe this place has it. Nobody had anything, like not even a car. And so I'm like, well, at least I have 2 cars. This is better than nothing. Steve's still on the phone talking, trying to get dealerships to come get our car for insurance, because we're literally in the middle of nowhere. Keep in mind, at this point, it's Alabama heat and everybody is sweating and tired and cranky. My Lord, help us. He did. It just was so stressful. So I can't remember the next order of events, but I know that when I called the local Enterprise place, they transferred me without ever explaining a thing, even though I'd given driver's license numbers, credit card numbers. I got an email confirmation that I had 2 cars rented from Enterprise, right? And they transferred me and they're like, how can I help you? And it's like the Bruton Enterprise. And I was like, did they transfer you without giving you any information? Like, I literally like full on panic. And he was like, who is this? And I was like, oh no. I'm like literally starting to panic, but also trying to stay calm, trying to stay the adult. And so then all of a sudden I hear a ping on my phone that I got 2 emails. And so I get the 2 confirmations that came through, and he must have gotten them at the same time, because he was like, oh, Mrs. Wagner? Well, it turns out, he was like, Mrs. Wagner, he was like, I'm working on a wait list. I'm the only person in this enterprise facility. He was like, I don't have a wait list. I don't even know if I have anything for you. So he calls me back while I call and get more dead ends to try to find rental cars. He calls me back and he's like, all I have is 1 7-passenger van. That's all I have. And he was like, and we close in 45 minutes. He was like, so you've got to get here in 45 minutes. And I'm like, well, how far away are you? I don't even know. So I'm like, Zach, Google this. You know, and Zoe's like helping with Ezra. And then poor or helping with Boaz, and then poor Ezra like just falls asleep. I'm like, is he having a heat stroke? Like, is it too hot out here for him? Like, but yet still trying to remain very calm. Like, oh, let's go in and get lollipops. Because the last thing all the kids need me to do is to panic, right? So anyways, so he's like, you've got to get here in 45 minutes, which I didn't tell you earlier in the story. Some of the places I called were closed at 4, and that was all there was to it. They were closed, so I didn't even have a chance. But then some of the places closed at 5. And so he was like, you got to get here in 45 minutes. So I'm like, how in the heck are we going to get there? Because I was like, and I kept explaining my situation. I was like, you don't understand. I have 8 children. I'm on the side of the road. I was like, we don't have a way to get there. There's no Uber, there's no Lyft, and there's no taxi service in Brewton, Alabama. But there was a very kind stranger, because literally every stranger that comes by, I'm like talking to and like trying to explain the situation, which this is just who I am. Like, I'll make a friend. You give me 5 minutes, I'll make a friend anywhere. It's just who I am. It's just how I'm wired. And so I'm just like talking to people. Like, it's literally how I deal with stress. And so then the Red Bull delivery guy comes out, and I'm like explaining the situation. And I'm like, we have to get my husband to this location in 45 minutes. We have no idea how we're gonna get them. I was like, do you have any friends that want to make 20 or 40 bucks to just take them there? And he's like, where is it? Because at this point, I'm like, it's only a few minutes away, because they're both in Brewton, Alabama, right? They're not that close. He was like, let me think about it. I was like, yes, you think about it. No pressure. I was like, I'm going to go tell my husband that you're thinking about it. I was like, you can meet us back over at that van. I was like, because we have no Uber and because my first question to him was like, is there any Uber or is there any Lyft? Like, is there anything in this town I don't know about that like I can pay to get a ride somewhere? Also, I didn't know this until later, but my husband talked to the lady at the gas station, and she was like, if you have to stay the night in here, do not stay at that hotel. Whatever you do, don't stay at that one. But the one on that side of town, that one might be okay. Oh my goodness. So he comes back over to the car, and I pull up on my maps, and I realized that it was like 25 minutes away. And I was like, it's 25 minutes away, which means like, that's like 50 minutes for him, right? Like there and back, because he's like right around the corner from his home. And I'm like, can you still do it? Like, will you do it? You know what I mean? And he was like, and I'm just kind of looking at my husband, and I'm kind of like sizing this guy up. I'm like, does he look like a serial killer? Like, we literally have no other choice. It's like we are reliant on the kindness of strangers. It was such a helpless feeling. So he agrees to it, and they've got to go because they have to make a decision fast, because this rental car place is closing. But I'm still on the phone trying to call place after place to get another car, because that's still only one car that seats 7 people. And so I'm on the phone, I'm calling more places, getting nowhere. And Steve sends me a text. He's like, call Peach Ford. They might have a Ford Focus. So I call, I was like, do you guys rent cars? She was like, no. And I was like, well, but someone said you have like a Ford Focus that I can rent. She was like, oh, you need to talk to Auto Parts. She transferred me to Auto Parts. I was like, can I rent a car? Like, I need a car. I'm in a really desperate situation. She was like, I can do that for you. She was like, but I haven't cranked that thing up in months. And she gave me the price. It was some exorbitant price, like more than what you should pay for a Ford Focus for a day. I was like, I don't care. I'll pay it. I'll absolutely pay it. I was like, she was like, well, let me crank it up and see if it works. She was like, but you got to get here by 5 because I got to pick up my kids. And I'm like, this is now less than, I want to say there was 25 minutes before 5 o'clock at this point. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I was like, I don't know if he can get there by 5. I was like, because he's picking up the van, but we need 2 cars. And so I'm like texting him and calling him. He's calling too and dealing with like the insurance company to get the tow for our car, and seeing if the insurance company and the dealership can give us a car rental. But there's like just no car rentals available in this area or even surrounding areas. And so I'm like texting him, and I'm like just hoping that there's some possible way that he can get to this other place that might be 25, 35, 45 minutes away. And I like pull it up and I realize it's 4 minutes away, and I'm like, yes, thankfully. And so I'm texting him that he's already there. He's like, he calls me. He's like, I'm here. We're not renting this. This thing is filled with awful smoke smells. It barely looks like it's running. The air conditioning doesn't work. There's no point in renting a second car that looks like it's not going to keep running. So I'm like, okay, well, at least we have 1 car. So he comes back, he picks us up. In the meantime, we go into the convenience store, but we also don't have the keys because Steve accidentally took the keys. So we can't like lock up the car. And of course, all the kids' devices are in there. And so like I'm standing near the door, like what do I think I'm gonna do with a baby in hand if someone goes in that van, which no one's gonna steal the van. Anyway, so I'm in the convenience store, but yet like looking out the window, like monitoring the children's choices. And normally I'm like monitoring sugar content and prices, but I'm like, get whatever you want. Actually, your limit is $2, which then my older kids like took over, and somehow they got everybody a slushie. I got a giant ice water for $5. I have no idea how that happened. Maybe the lady just gave us like a good deal. I don't know, or my kids are like awesome bargain hunters. So then which I filled up that ice water, and it had like the soft ice, the soft ice that is so good. I filled that ice water up so many times. I was like, I'm living large up in here. So anyways, this is almost to the end of the story. This is getting so long. So Steve comes back, and I'm like looking at the van, and I'm looking at like how big the like space is, the cargo space and all that. And I'm like, could 2 kids fit in the cargo space? Because we're like, what are we gonna do? Oh, and at this point, we have a promise that in Pensacola, Florida, we're in Brewton, Alabama. In Pensacola, Florida, there is a 15-passenger van. But again, same story we hear in all these other places. You gotta get here by 5. I was like, there's no way we can get there by 5. We're a state away. And my husband still has to come back with the van, and we still have no idea, like we're in an emergency situation here. And so she talks to someone. I'm just begging her. I'm like telling her the whole story, telling her how many kids we have. And she was like, I think I found someone who will stay 30 minutes, but that's all they'll stay. And I'm like, by the time my husband gets back, I think it's like at 5 o'clock at this point. And I'm like, 30 minutes doesn't help us because it was like an hour and a half away. So like, what are we gonna do? And we have hotel reservations here in Alabama on the Gulf Coast. And it's like, what are we gonna do? So we drove an hour and 40 minutes, all 10 of us, in a 7-passenger van. My 17-year-old was like a human car seat for Boaz because car seats were not an option. It was so crowded, but it was literally the only vehicle in that county or surrounding counties or anywhere that was open. Like there was no other choice. And we literally had to leave a bunch of our stuff, which is just stuff, but a bunch of our stuff, like so we're here at the beach without a pack and play, without a stroller, like all the baby accessories, right? Because those take up way too much room. It was insane. And I will post the picture. Oh my goodness. It was just absolutely insane. And it just makes me reflect on like the most awful feeling in the world to me is to feel helpless, is to feel absolutely, completely helpless, and how dependent we were on perfect strangers for their kindness. It's just, I'm so grateful. That Red Bull guy literally gave us wings. I don't know, and it just made me think a lot. A few weeks ago I had a major emergency with my health, and it made me, it's like we have so much less control than we like to believe. We go through life with like an illusion of control. We have influence, but we don't have control as much as we think. And I tend to overestimate how much control I have and underestimate how much influence I have. So anyways, those are my thoughts. It made me think about the coronavirus or COVID-19 is, I guess, what we're calling it. And I'm like, we have so much less control and so much more influence than we think. And how helpless we all must feel. We're all feeling so helpless in the middle of this pandemic. And it also just made me like so passionate about what I do with Plexus. Like, no, I don't have control. I take a triplex, which helps reduce inflammation, helps manage and balance blood sugars, and helps work on gut health. And our immune system is in our gut. And it's like, I'm passionate about that. And my whole family are on the products. We have been for over 3 years, and I have a team of people that are on the products. I don't think that controls whether I will get COVID-19, but I think it influences how strong my body will be if we get it. So I don't know, it just made me like so much more passionate. And there's even more stories that are very personal that made me realize, because my tendency is to think when something like that happens is like, oh, this is all my fault and what could I have done to fix it? I was like, at one point I'm like, Steve, from now on we're always driving 2 cars wherever we go. Like that's all there is to it. We're always driving 2 cars. And then I realized 2 cars could break down, like 1 car could break down. Like I have so much less control and so much more influence than I can imagine. And it made me think of like, that's kind of what all my stories were about when I was sharing tips about like what to do in the car. It's like you have a lot of influence on how the climate goes, but you don't have total control. So those are my thoughts. I didn't want to tell the story 50 times to all the people I love so well. So there's the story.